Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. So this is The Stand, the 7th of September 1990 through the 10th of January 1991. This is book 3, chapter 61. So Flag is kind of losing his hold on people, and it's implied that it's because he rules by terror. So he has everyone afraid of him, and therefore they obey him. But people are starting to become uncertain and not really convinced that he is all he says he is, and not all that convinced that he is able to maintain control and, be a good leader and figure things out. So they don't like him because he definitely makes them uneasy. There is this fear of disappointing him. It's more of a, if I mess up, then I will have to pay the price, which with Flag is usually your life. Also, Flag has this uncanny knack of just appearing. So it's one of those things where, like, I don't know, for some reason I'm thinking about Reality Bites when Ethan Hawke ends up stealing a candy bar. And it's like, if someone did that, Flag would appear instantly as soon as you opened it and took a bite, and he would know what you did. Even if you had checked, there was no one around, Flag will show up and he will deal with you. Quote, one moment he wasn't there and the next moment he was. He could be in LA one day, or so the talk went, and show up in Boise a day later on foot. Page 933. There are a whole bunch of Flag's people, and they've been separated into little groups, and they are watching the road that the judge is going to be traveling on. So Flag is aware of the judge. He is also aware that there's 2 additional spies. Flag's people have orders to kill the judge, but they are not to touch his face because Flag wants to use his head as a message. He's going to send the head back to the free zone. The judge is still traveling. He's still on his little adventure. He is now in what he considers to be the West because he's already seen a man who is hanged. So he has a sense of foreboding. Things are not pleasant anymore. He pulls up into a motel and he is sitting there, and a crow peeks in his window at him, and he has this. At first he's startled, and then he relaxes and he's like, oh, it's just a crow. But then he starts realizing that this crow seems very cognizant, very human-like, and he is convinced that it's Flag. So he raises his gun to shoot the crow, and he's thinking, what if I end things just by killing this crow and somehow it traps Flag within his spirit? Quote, and it came to him with a dreamy, testicle-shivering certainty that this was the dark man, his soul, his Ka, somehow projected into this rain-drenched, grinning crow that was looking in at him, checking up on him. Page 938. So he raises his gun, and the crow has this sense of knowledge. It knows what's going to happen. It's worried. It wasn't anticipating this, in the safety zone. So the crow gets away. So the judge leaves the next morning. He passes 2 of the men who are on lookout, and the guy who's actually at the window looking sees the judge go by, and he has this moment of, oh, that's the person, but I wasn't really expecting it to be our outpost that ended up getting him. So he's kind of in shock and delayed and doesn't do anything. Finally, he gets the other guy, and he's like, we have to go, we have to get this guy. The judge just passed by, and I don't want to get in trouble for not dealing with it on our watch. So they end up trailing the judge. They stop him and start making small talk, and the guy who initially missed seeing him go by is a complete idiot. He escalates things, and there's a big shootout, and the idiot guy ends up killing the judge, and he blows away all of his facial features. So the one thing he wasn't supposed to do was shoot him in the head, and that's what he ended up doing. So he's worried, he's freaked out, he's not sure what he's going to do, and all of a sudden Flag appears, and it's mentioned that Flag is brushing crow feathers from his hair. So the implication would be that he was that crow, and that's how he gets around. Chapter 62. Dana is now in Las Vegas, and she has been around for about 8 days, and she has kind of glommed on to Lloyd, and she is using him to get information. So she starts a relationship with him, lets him get his guard down, and then she starts just kind of making little small talk, prodding, getting information out of him without him really realizing what's happening. He just thinks it's pillow talk. Quote, she had already accumulated enough information about the operation over here to scare the living Jesus out of everyone back in Boulder. It would only take the news of the jet plane training program to do that. Page 945. So she has found out that they are teaching people how to fly. So Dana gets Lloyd to talk about his plans, and she always manages to get dressed and undressed while he's out of the room because she has her switchblade hidden. While Dana is working, she sees who she thinks is Tom Cullen, and she thinks they wouldn't send Tom. That must be crazy. But then it starts eating at her. She starts thinking about it more and more, and she realizes that, yes, that was probably Tom that she saw, and he's another spy. She doesn't know anything about the judge until the judge is killed. So Dana gets tossed out of bed in the middle of the night because they have discovered that she is the second spy. And she's taken to Flag, and she puts on a very brave face. She has managed to get away from these people long enough to go to the bathroom and put her switchblade on. Quote, she was going to her death. She was quite sure of that. If so, let it be so. She had the knife. For him first, if she could, and then for herself, if necessary. Page 956. When she gets in there, Flag is nothing like her vision. She is imagining this horrible person with, no features and red eyes and hooded and just very like out of a horror movie. And he's just a regular guy, and he's smiling. And it kind of catches her off guard. And he says, let's talk about this. I know there's another spy. And as he's talking to her, she feels like he's hypnotizing her. So she puts a lot of effort into looking away, trying to keep her wits about her. Because he's saying that, we can coexist. We don't need to fight. Don't worry. I'm going to let you go. I'll give you safe passage out of town. And something that Dana notices that's weird is that Flag has no lines on his palms. They're completely smooth. So he tells Dana, go back to the zone. Tell them that I don't appreciate spies, and I don't think that we should be in that position where we're spying on each other. So if you want to come over, that's fine. Just do it out in the open. Just let me know. So Flag insists that there is another spy, and Dana, she says, I don't know anything about that. She's confused as to how he knew about the judge and her, but he doesn't know about this third spy. And she is thinking it's Tom, and I think it clicks, and she realizes that Tom is different. Tom is special, and Flag can't penetrate his brain. So Dana realizes he's not going to let her go. He's just not. Dana tries to attack Flag with her knife, and he has tricked her. He made it look like he was closer to her, and then he stepped away. So she realizes at this point the only thing she can do is to kill herself. So she jumps at the wall that is just entirely windows, and she breaks one enough where she's able to get her head through. And, quote, momentum carried her halfway through the hole, and it was there that she was lodged, bleeding. Page 965. So she realizes that, she can't make it out the window. If Flag pulls her back into the room, he's going to torture her and try and extract the information about Tom, and she can't have that. So, quote, she killed herself by simply whipping her head viciously around to the right. A razor-sharp jag of glass plunged deep into her throat. Another slipped into her right eye. Her body went stiff for a moment, and her hands beat against the glass. Then she went limp. What the dark man dragged back into the office was only a bleeding sack. Page 965. So Flag loses his shit. He did not foresee this. He was powerless to stop it. She's dead now and of no use to him, both in the way of information and, his plan to send back the spies' bodies. So he tells Lloyd to come in, take Dana's body away, and burn it. And later, when Whitney and Lloyd are discussing things, Whitney asks Lloyd, do you think that Flag got the third spy out of her, the information about that? And Lloyd says, quote, I don't think he did. It went wrong for him somehow. She got lucky, or she outthought him, and that doesn't happen often. Page 967. So chapter 63, we are reintroduced to Julie Lowry. She has come to Las Vegas and she recognizes Tom Cullen. And she starts talking about how he and Nick are a matched set. And so that is worrisome because she caused problems for them way back when they didn't want her to join anymore because she was unstable and a bitch. Chapter 64, Harold is in his death throes. He has been sitting by a rock with a broken leg for 5 days. He had an accident with his motorcycle while he and Nadine were traveling to Las Vegas, and it was a flag-created accident. So Harold hit a patch of oil and he flew over the guardrail and down a steep cliff. So he has broken his leg. He's in terrible pain. Nadine refused to help him, so he ended up crawling as far as he could up the ravine, and he tried to shoot her and missed, but just barely. It was probably Flag who prevented him from shooting Nadine. And she was shocked, and she ended up taking off and leaving him. So Harold is ashamed of what he turned out to be, ashamed that he was tricked and, didn't just try and make a life for himself in Boulder. Like, that would have been the best thing. No one knew who he was. He could have just started over, but he didn't. And so he writes down a little letter explaining himself, and he kills himself. Chapter 65. Flag is out in the desert. Quote, the old woman had died, and at first he had thought that was good. In spite of everything, he had been afraid of the old woman. Page 980. So Flag was actually fearful of Mother Abigail, which I take to mean that Mother Abigail was stronger, although she was afraid of him as well. So I don't know. Flag seems to be losing his abilities. His third eye is not working. That's what he used to send out, like the Eye of Sauron, and he would observe things that way, but he's having a really difficult time now doing that. So Nadine has been traveling since she left Harold, and she finally meets Flag, and she is repulsed by him. She doesn't like his touch. She doesn't want to be there. She just does not like this. And yet at the same time, she is attracted to him. And it's very disturbing because she's been promised to him and she's known that since childhood. So it is kind of like a destiny / fate thing, even though she did try to say, hey, I want to be good now, but, I need Larry to do it. I wish she could have just found the strength within herself to do it. He leads her to camp, and they start out where she is a willing participant, but then eventually she gets freaked out by him, and she's like, nope, I'm out of here. I don't want any part of this, pregnancy thing. And he doesn't take no for an answer, and he rapes her in the desert repeatedly all night, and he has definitely gotten her pregnant. So after that, she becomes catatonic, and she has a lot of fever dream imagery, and it reminds me of Pennywise because she sees, quote, a demon with glaring yellow lamps for eyes, windows into a hell never even considered. Page 988. So the yellow eyes just makes me think of Pennywise. So the fact that Flag kind of morphs in front of her into this demon thing, which I don't know how much of that is that's what he actually presents as, and how much of it is that's what she is seeing. So I don't know. Chapter 66, Julie tells Lloyd about Nick and Tom, and he files it as like a thing to check on later, which is good, because Tom leaves by the light of the full moon. It's time for him to go back, and he passes right by Flag and Nadine. And Flag's little red eye went out looking for Tom. Well, not Tom specifically, but his eye went out looking for something that was passing by them and can't grasp onto it and see. So Tom is very, very lucky. Chapter 67, Flag is back in Vegas, and he has his wife in tow, and everyone is looking at Nadine, who has, quote, white hair, horrible sunburn, utterly empty eyes. Page 1001. Lloyd checks on Tom and Nick, and he finds out that Nick is on the red list, and this is something that Lloyd has never even heard about. And it's upsetting to him because he is the second in command, and the fact that Flag doesn't put all of his eggs into one basket starts alarming him, because if he had known about the red list, he would have acted much faster. Lloyd thinks, quote, the third spy had been here all along and Flag hadn't known. page 1005. So in other news, Trash Can Man has gone completely off the rails. He has rigged everything to explode at their little training facility. Pilots are dead. It's a mess, and people are pissed off that Trash Can Man is so high up in the ranking, and yet he is so unstable and obviously murderous. Tom has a dream out in the desert, and Nick appears to him, and he guides him. So Nick becomes kind of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi for the rest of this book for Tom. Flag's kingdom is just falling apart. He's uncertain and questioning, and he's starting to, second guess himself, like, why didn't I tell Lloyd about the red list? I probably should have, kind of thing. And Nadine manages to piss him off in such a way that he throws her off of the balcony that they're on. And as he does it, as he tosses her and his unborn child over the edge, he realizes, oh, she wanted this. I have set her free. She couldn't do it herself. I just did it for her, and she knew it would happen, kind of thing. Chapter 68, Trash Can Man is recounting the explosions in his brain, and he was going to take them apart and not use them, but at the last minute he decided the fire is just too much of an appeal for him, and he had to have it. He had to burn these people. And so he starts thinking about maybe finding a way to seek redemption or atonement. Chapter 69, Lloyd is again talking to Whitney, and people are planning to go to South America because they realize they can't really go east because those people likely won't have them after what they've done. And they've decided south is the best because north is going to be too cold in the winter. So Whitney wants to know if Lloyd wants to join them, and Lloyd is like, you know what, I can't, I owe Flag too much. And Lloyd is also thinking in the back of his mind that, you guys probably aren't going to get very far because Flag knows everything, and he will find out about this. Even if I don't tell him, he'll find out. Chapter 70, Trash Can Man has found a radioactive warhead, and he decides to haul it up out of the military base that it's in and take it to Flag. Chapter 71, Flag sends his eye out, and he spies on Stu, Larry, Ralph, and Glenn. And he decides that, you know what, I'm going to put all of their heads on spikes, and I'm going to include Kojak's head as well. Chapter 72, the four men have found Harold's corpse. They've also found the corpse of the kid. If you'll remember earlier, he was the kind of brief traveling companion to Trash Can Man, and he's the one that got eaten by the wolves. And they are very disturbed by the fact that he was attacked by wolves. They end up getting to a huge washout where the highway is gone, and there's a massive 50-foot gully that has been kind of worn into the earth. So they're climbing up, and Stu falls like a rag doll and just bounces off of everything on the way down and breaks his leg in a couple places, and they end up leaving him behind. Well, Larry really wants to take Stu with him, but they're saying to Larry that, that's against the rules. You're not allowed, we're supposed to leave with, just what we had on our backs, nothing else. We're supposed to go on foot. Whatever game we're playing, there were rules that Mother Abigail told us about, and we can't violate those. So Stu has to be left behind. And Larry does not agree, and he's very angry. Glenn ends up leaving his arthritis pills with Stu and says, you know what, these have a morphine base. If you need to, you can take several of them and everything will go away. He says, quote, pull the plug if you have to, Stuart. Don't screw around. Page 1055. So Larry's in charge now. And quote, Larry went up the bank quickly and joined the other two. They stood and waved down. Stu raised his hand in return. They left. And they never saw Stu Redman again. Page 1056. And that's always one of those chapters that gets you because you're thinking either Stu's going to die or all three of them are going to die. If they never see each other again, something bad is going to happen. And it makes you want to keep reading and find out. Chapter 73. The three of them move on. So Ralph, Glenn, and Larry are now alone. Quote, not one of them wanted to look into the face of another for fear of seeing his own guilt mirrored there. Page 1057. So they find out that Kojak is just missing. They all of a sudden realize he's not there, and they start thinking maybe he stayed behind with Stu, which is indeed what happened. And he brings Stu a rabbit that he killed, and then Stu keeps saying fetch, and every time he says that, Kojak goes out and gets a piece of wood. So Stu is able to use some matches, light a fire. He, isn't in a great position, but at least he has a dog for protection and warmth, and the dog is able to get him things that he needs. So Glenn, Larry, and Ralph meet a roadblock of men, and these guys are armed, and they place them under arrest. They're all locked up separately once they get to Las Vegas. Flagg and Lloyd visit Glenn, and again mentions that Flagg's eyes have a yellow coloring sometimes. Again, the Pennywise thing. Glenn laughs and pisses Flagg off, as we've known that, if you laugh at him or if you disrespect him, he loses his temper. And Glenn is mostly laughing because, Flagg is just a normal guy. They built him up into something really monumental and way more of a boogeyman than he actually technically is. And Glenn says, quote, "I'm laughing as much at our own foolishness as at your regrettable lack of substance." Page 1071. So Flagg has, his ego is out of control and can't allow that. He tells Lloyd to shoot Glenn, which Glenn says, "Hey, why don't you shoot Flagg? Because that would save everyone a lot of trouble." Glenn is the one who does end up getting shot, as we knew it would be. We knew Lloyd wasn't going to turn on Flagg. And the next day, Larry is thinking about his situation and about how he is likely going to die very soon. And quote, "The old wound in himself had finally closed, leaving him at peace. He had felt the two people that he had been all his life, the real one and the ideal one, merge into one living being. His mother would have liked this Larry." Page 1074. So Larry has finally reached peace and acceptance, and he has finally morphed into the man that he thinks is appropriate for him. Flagg is going to publicly execute Larry and Ralph by tearing them to pieces. He reads embellished charges in front of the group, the entire town. Everyone is gathered. Everyone has to watch this, unless they have young kids, then they're excused. And he includes the people that Trash Can Man murdered with his booby trapping of all the planes and stuff. So he includes those people he wants public opinion to be very unfavorable of these men, and so he just starts adding in these extra charges. Whitney speaks up, and he tries to turn the crowd, and Flagg burns him with a fireball, and then this fireball is just like hanging out. Then Trash Can Man appears with his radioactive atomic bomb, and Flagg is actually afraid. Quote, "Flagg felt terror seep into the chambers of his heart. It was a terror of the unknown and the unexpected." Page 1083. So Lloyd and Flagg try and get Trash Can Man to take the bomb away. And by some crazy confluence of events, the fireball that Flagg had sent after Whitney, and then it was just floating around, it turns into what Ralph called the hand of God, and it did look like a hand, and that activates the bomb. So Flagg disappears out of his clothes. Quote, "Something slumped and hunched and almost without shape, something with enormous yellow eyes, slit by dark cat's pupils, was standing there." Page 1085. "The bomb explodes, quote, and the righteous and the unrighteous alike were consumed in that holy fire." Page 1085. So that's it for Las Vegas. It's done. Chapter 74, Stu is sick with some kind of a flu, and he writes a goodbye letter to Fran, attaches it to Kojak's collar. He feels the bomb go off, and he struggles to climb up that embankment, and he has Kojak to help him. He gets up there in time to see this mushroom cloud, and he knows that something terrible's happened, and he knows that, he'll never see the three men again. So Stu's getting worse, and he's not sure what to do, and all of a sudden Tom Cullen appears. So Tom is able to assist. They eventually head home. They find a car, and they attempt to drive it, which is next to impossible with Stu's leg, but they manage to get to a hotel in another city, and they stay the night. Stu is delirious and burning up. Chapter 75, Nick appears to Tom again and kind of sleepwalks him into a pharmacy, and he shows Tom the pills that Stu needs because he has pneumonia. So he picks out 4 different pills for Tom to give Stu, and he gives him instructions that he needs to walk Stu around, and he needs to make sure he eats all his medicine and gets juice and stuff like that. So Stu battles pneumonia for 2 weeks. Tom takes really good care of him. They continue on and hole up at another hotel in Grand Junction, Colorado. They promptly get snowed in, and weeks pass. Eventually they leave on the 30th of November, They spend Christmas traveling. Stu, Tom, and Kojak have a little Christmas together. It's very sweet, very touching. Stu's been having nightmares about Fran's baby, so they press on, even though they probably should have stayed the whole winter in just one spot. They finally make it to Boulder. Chapter 76, Franny's at the hospital. She's concerned that her baby has the flu. So she named her baby Peter for her father, and she wakes up and sees Stu, Tom, and Kojak. Chapter 77, the doctors tell Fran that they think her baby is actually going to make it. He definitely had Captain Trips, but it's not progressing to that final stage, and he's reversing course. Chapter 78, Franny wants to go to Maine. Quote, there are some beautiful places, Stu. Bridgeton, Sweden, Castle Rock, page 1143. So they decide to go to Maine and live. They pass by Mother Abigail's farmhouse and stay there for a while. And they've decided that, they're eventually going to have to go back to Colorado and, have their kid meet other kids. She's pregnant again. It's just this whole feeling of things used to be small and nicer, and now they're getting bigger, and so there's this wanderlust that a lot of people are feeling. The circle closes. Flag wakes up on a tropical beach. Quote, his mind was as empty as the mind of a newborn child. Page 1152. He's wearing his boots and his jeans somehow. And he knows that he is Russell Faraday now. That's his new name. The quote, the place where you made your stand never mattered, only that you were there and still on your feet. Page 1153. So that is it. That is the stand. We don't know what's going to happen to Randall Flagg, but apparently he's going to convince the natives that, they should be his minions. Yeah, I like the stand a lot. I get invested in the characters. I always forget how it's mostly, the story is mostly just leading up to the confrontation with Flagg. There's not much in Las Vegas. I'm always shocked at how quickly it goes at that point.